Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about formatting a book. Now we're primarily going to be talking about doing this for print purposes. So I'm going to walk you through the mechanics of what it takes to get your book ready from a manuscript to a printable document that you can send off to a printer like KDP or other printers and have them produce a hard copy of your book and then ultimately ship that out to booksellers or to you if you want to just give your book away or sell it directly. One thing that you'll want to do before you ever go to get your book ready for formatting is to apply styles to your manuscript as you type it. And the reason you want to do this is it'll greatly accelerate your formatting once you get ready to get your book ready for printing. Now, basically what a style is predefined formatting that you can apply to a block of text. So this allows me to take a single style that's defined in a given format and apply it over and over and over in my document. And then if I want to change that style, I can go in and change the style and it will go through my document and update everywhere that style has been applied. Now, this is useful for whenever you're doing things like formatting chapter headings or formatting paragraphs in your document, such as the first paragraph of a chapter or the subsequent paragraphs in your chapter. This allows me to, say, center all of my chapter headings simply by updating a style rather than going through the entire document one chapter heading at a time and centering it that way. This allows me to have more consistent formatting and I don't make as many mistakes when I'm formatting my document. So this is the unformatted manuscript for my fourth novel that I'm currently working on for editing, and I have applied to chapter headings a style right here, and I've applied heading 1. And this is one way that I can organize the content. It gives me the navigation pane, which you can simply go over here to view and click on navigation pane. And this allows me to jump around in the novel rather quickly. And it also allows me to format the chapter headings very easily. And it can also be used to create a table of contents. But we're mainly talking about creating the formatting for this document. So if I wanted to change all of the formatting in this document for my chapters, I can simply go over here to Home and then modify the style that I used on that particular block of text. If I wanted to say change the font, I could go over here to Caveat right here and then say 26 size font, 26 point font, and then that will change not only chapter 1, but chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, and all of the other chapter headings in this book that have applied the heading 1 style to those chapter headings. So one of the first things you'll want to do is choose the dimensions of your book. Now, the dimensions are the height of your book and the width of your book. And these are going to determine how large the cover is and ultimately is going to impact the number of pages in your book too. Most novels are going to be between 4 and 6 inches wide and between 6 and 9 inches tall. A 4 to 6 inch wide novel is something that you can comfortably hold in your hand and read it if you're sitting on the couch or on a plane or something like that. It's something you can stick in a bag as well. It's not going to lie flat, but typically that's not the way that most people read these kinds of books. So it's going to be very appropriate for that kind of media. My books are 5 inches wide and 8 inches tall, and that's largely determined by one of the options available on KDP, which is who I use to print my books. So setting the page size is fairly straightforward in Microsoft Word. Once you have it up, you can go over to Layout and then go to Size and then choose the page size that you're going to be using for your particular book. I'm using 5x8 for mine, and if I was to choose 4x6, it'd probably double the page count. But at 5x8, it's about a 650 page book, but that's what I'm going to be using for printing all my books because that's what KDP is requiring me to use, and that's typically going to be a good novel size as well. This is the formatted manuscript for my third novel. It's what I'm mainly going to be using as an example for this video. And this one I have applied different styles to this, getting it ready more for publishing. So I've applied a heading right here that is basically making everything that uses the heading 1 style, which you see over here on the left, just like we saw in the other unformatted document, have a centered all caps title heading. Another style that I'm using this is this first paragraph style right here, where the first paragraph, I didn't want it to be indented. And that's just a stylistic thing. Now, some people might want to make the first character of this larger than all the other characters. That's entirely discretionary on how you want to set this up for formatting your book. But I didn't want that to be indented, so I just basically removed the indentation right there and then applied this style to all of the first paragraphs in my book. And then if I want to go back and change that, I can easily go back and change that particular formatting for everything that is a first paragraph in the book. Every other paragraph is just using the normal formatting, so to speak, and that is just an indented paragraph that's using justified text and this particular font right here at a particular size, etc. And you can see that's how it's going to work out for all of the other chapters in my book. So again, styles will make formatting your book very easy to do and expedite the process so that you don't have to go through every paragraph, every line, everything, and apply these one at a time, just using bold, italic, underline, whatever it is that you might be doing. Use styles and it'll make formatting your book a lot quicker once you get ready to publish it. So the next thing you want to do is get your page setup right. Now, books are a little bit different than something you might print on your printer at home. They have different parameters because the book layout is going to be a little bit different than just something that you're going to staple in the top left corner and then just send to a friend or mail it or whatever it might be doing. So you want to set up your margins to be a little bit different than what you would do in a standard Word document that you're going to print on a printer. So you want to use what they call mirror margins. And what this basically allows you to have is a two-page view of your book where the margins are going to be basically a reflection of one another. So the margins on the left page and the margins on the right page will be essentially a mirror image of one another. And that way, whenever you're formatting your book, every other page will have a different format for the margins. And that way you don't have to format every other page independently of one another. These are some common values that you'll find that are used for print books. 0.76 inches for the top, bottom, and inside margins, and then 0.6 for the outside. And the reason why they have these values is because when they go to cut the book, it's not always a precise cut, and so you don't want to have text too close to the edge that gets cut off and then you lose the content that that text represents. So they typically encourage 3/4 of an inch around the top, bottom, and inside, and then 0.6 on the outside margin. Now the gutter is the inside of the book where the two pages come together, and that is basically how far apart those are going to be. So 0.14 inches is typically the value that is inserted there, and that is going to be split between the two. Now, also you'll want to include page numbering when you go to format your pages, and page numbering is going to be important to allow people to follow along in your book if somebody says turn to page 315, or if you have a table of contents or something like that. So any of these things are going to be very important for page setup. So here again is the formatted version of Legacy of the Legend. Now, to change the margins on this, you simply go to Layout, and this is where you can set up your margins. So if you want to take one of these defaults, you can use Mirrored right here. And that's just going to take some of those default values that I was talking about. Now, you can also come over here to Custom Margins and customize this if you need to. But this is the place that you would want to do that. So you can say multiple pages, typically mirrored margin is what you want to have for a book. And then if normal would be for your typical printer at home, but this is for book printing. And then this is where you can set the values. And these are where I got these values from. And these are commonly used as defaults in many word processors. And this is top, inside, bottom, outside, and then gutter right there. And that's how you can set those. So if I wanted to create a more top margin, I can change that, and it's just going to bump that text down a little bit right there, and I can undo that. But in any case, that's how you can set the margins in your book. Now, page numbering is fairly straightforward. You just come over here and you go to Insert, and then you click on Page Numbering, and you can go to put the page numbering wherever you want. At the bottom of the page is typically where I like to put it, down at the bottom center. Now you can put it in the top right, you can put it at the top center, wherever it works in your book. It's really discretionary, but I typically put it down in the bottom center, and then all of my pages have that number. And if you can go down to my last page, you can see that I have a rather lengthy book of over 600 pages once I have those page numbers inserted, and you get the page count and so on. Some other things that you'll want to look at for formatting is paragraph spacing, line spacing, and text alignment, and these kinds of things. Now, typically in a book, you don't have any kind of spacing between the paragraphs. The only way you know that you're on a new paragraph if the text is indented on the first line of the paragraph. Now, if you're writing academic writing, you might have double spaced, but typically novels and books only have single space between each of the lines in the text. Now, the text alignment typically is going to be what we call justified, and that's where all the text lines up flush on the right margin and on the left margin. So it makes the text presentation very clean and nice on the page itself. And then word spacing is typically just a single space between each word, and then you can also set that based on points, but typically just take the defaults on that. But these are things that you might have to change if you're trying to format this yourself. So here's some sample text from my third novel that's formatted. I don't indent the first paragraph of each chapter, but every subsequent paragraph is indented. There's no paragraph spacing, there's no line spacing. The text is justified, and that's very typical of a typical book that you're going to be publishing, whether it be fiction or nonfiction. So another consideration is which font to use. Generally speaking, you want to use a serif font, which I'll talk about what that is in just a minute at 11 point. Now, if you're writing children's books or you're writing a large print edition of your book, you can change this, but generally speaking, serif fonts at 11 point is what most books are going to be using. So here's the same text in 3 different fonts. This is a sans serif font, this is a serif font, and this is a stylistic font. So for print purposes, books are most commonly printed using a serif font. Now, a serif are these little additions they add to the letters. Now, this supposedly makes it easier to read. So these bases on the A are these little wings off the back of this B, or these tips on the C. And these add a stylistic element that makes the letters more identifiable in the print version of a given text, and supposedly makes it easier to read. A screen typically uses sans serif fonts because that's supposed to be easier to read on a screen, while these are supposed to be easier to read on paper. There's been some research into this, and it's really inconclusive, but just for tradition, most books are still printed using serif fonts, and most screens use sans serif fonts. Now, the one thing that you don't want to do in your book is use stylistic fonts. Now, sometimes you can use these for aspects of your book, maybe the chapter headings or things like that, but don't get carried away with using stylistic fonts in the body of your content, because it makes it hard to read when most books are going to be expected to use like a serif font in that case. So this is the formatted text for my third novel again, and I'm using Garamond at 11 point. Now, there are a lot of other serif fonts that you can use. Some folks like to use Times New Roman, which is a little bolder, and some people think it's easier to read. To me, I like Garamond because it looks a little lighter, and so when you print this, it seems to create less eye strain. That's more of a personal subjective kind of thing though. But in any case, having that serif font does make it look nice, and it looks more traditional in the print whenever you go to actually print the book. This is additional content that you might have in your book in addition to the main content of your book. You might always have a title page in your book. This is typically the first thing you see when you open up the cover of the book. You'll see a page that has the title and the author without anything else on it. There's no graphics on it or anything like that. It's just similar to the title of the book on the cover, but it's representing just the title and the author without any other kind of information. Some books have a dedication. I've dedicated all my books to either my wife or my daughters, and that's something you might have on a page of its own or with other information. Copyright is something you want to put on there if your work is copyrighted and you're publishing that book. Also, disclaimers. These are just legal notifications that you might want to include. I almost always include one on my books, basically saying that the characters and places of this book are a product of the author's imagination. If they look like anybody else or sound like other places, it's typically by coincidence. Of course, you might want to include maps in the opening pages of your books. If you're writing fantasy like I do, having a map is sometimes a nice thing to have so that your reader can go and reference that map whenever they're seeing a place show up in your text. Oh, that's here. And it just gives them a way to go back and flip to that and say, the adventure is going on in this city, or they're traveling to this other place or this other location. A couple of things that I don't typically include in my book, I put them on the back page, but it's an about the author, and I put that on the back cover of my book. Typically, it's just a little blurb about who I am and my interests and things like that. Some people have an entire page at the back of the book, or they might put it on the dust jacket, but it's something that you might want to include as the part of your book at the end, or you can put it at the beginning. Most people will put it at the end on the back cover, or on the dust jacket on the back page. And another thing that you might want to include if you're writing nonfiction is a bibliography. That's just basically all your works cited and additional resources that whoever's reading your book might want to read. Others might include a bibliography of other books they've written if you're writing novels. So they'll have a page where they talk about, here are the other books in this series, or here are some other series that this author has written. Or if it's an anthology and they're writing a part of an edited series and it's just a single installment, it'll talk about the other books in that edited series, and it'll talk about the editor, and this is just a single installment of a given author's contribution to that series. So here are the opening pages of my third novel. I have my title page, Legacy of the Legend, and there's my name, of course. And this is the notifications page, is what I called it. It basically has the disclaimer and the copyright, the ISBN number. That may be something you want to include, is the ISBN number if you have one. This is the dedication page. This one is dedicated to my second daughter, and I call it To Ember Elise, my second board, and my legacy. And then I have maps for the world that this unfolds in. It's just a map that I drew, and I have a whole nother video on how to draw maps. And then you dive right into chapter 1. Now, some other things you might want to include is a table of contents if you're writing nonfiction. I don't have a bibliography or an about the author page or anything like that. I simply just get to the end of the book and it's over. It's the end of the book. That's the last page. There's nothing after this page. But if you are writing a book of series, you might want to include a bibliography or something about those other books if you so choose. Some people have a teaser chapter from the next book as the last chapter in the book. It's just the opening chapter of the next book. And that's sometimes what authors will do to kind of incentivize you to buy whatever the next book in the series is. A couple other things that I like to look for after I've applied formatting to my text is to look for orphaned content. And that's basically where I have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 words on a page and the rest of the page is blank. And the way that I can do that simply by zooming out on the document. I can't read this like this, but I can get an idea of what the pages look like as if they were images kind of just laid out like this. I'm just basically looking for pages that have just like a single line of text, maybe 3 or 4 words appear. That can be disruptive whenever you're actually reading the book and you see what's this page, it's only got 3 or 4 words on it, and that just feels very disjointed whenever you're reading a book. Sometimes you might end up with blank pages in your document if you have like a line break in your text somewhere or a page break and it inserts a blank page. And you might want to scan through the document like this, just see if you have any blank pages so that you can ensure that you're not going to be creating a book that's got a blank page in the middle of a chapter. And that would be disruptive as well. And this one I've already done that on, so you don't really see it. But if I was doing a new book, you would probably see a couple of different pages where I had orphan content. Or there might even be a blank page or 2 in this because of page breaks or things like that. Now, there are templates online that you can use for a lot of this formatting. If you want the styles already predefined and things like that, you can go out to KDP site and they have a whole bundle of these things that you can download and use for KDP publishing. You can also use these with other publishers as well, but KDP provides them for their sizes that they support. Now you can download the blank templates. I'm going to download these ones with sample content right here. And once these download, you can then use these for formatting your own book. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up when done. So here is the one that I just downloaded. And if I come over here and drill down into this, I can go into English and I can open up this 5x8 document right here. These are all the sizes that it supports, but this is a good novel size. You might be able to use some of these other ones, but this is the one I'm going to be using for my book. And this is one that will give you some basic setups. So you can see the book title, the author's name. Here's the copyright information, dedication, any other data that you want to have. And this has got a table of contents, but it's also got a lot of the different kinds of things that you might have concerning, chapter setups and font setups and styles and different things like that you can just simply apply to your document. Now, I chose not to do a lot of the same kinds of things that they're doing here with these large amounts of space between either the tops of the chapters or other things like that. But this content will allow you to have a lot of the styles already defined, and you can just basically take your text out of your manuscript and paste it in here, and then just simply accept the destination formatting, and it will apply all the styles over what styles that you have already defined in your document, but you don't have to go through and manually change all that. But you'll have to go through the document and look for orphan content and probably massage things quite a bit, but it will save you a lot of time if you want to start with a template like this. So hopefully these tips will help you get your book formatted and ready for publishing. I'm going to be doing a whole nother video on how to use KDP to upload your book and get it published on KDP. If you haven't watched my video on how to design a cover, that's something else that you'll need for KDP publishing. So once you have your book formatted and you have your cover design, then you can take those and upload them to KDP to create a book that's ready for printing.